Daniel Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Wisconsin Badgers, one of the top teams in the Big Ten in the 2021 season, as this team went 9-4 overall. They barely missed out on winning the Big Ten West, and certainly this team, though, moving into 2022, definitely looks like the team that could potentially win the division yet again this season, and why that is we'll be going over here today. We'll be going over the player system we'll be losing, who they'll be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with some notable games from last season. And this team 9-4 overall last year. So, I mean, it wasn't a bad season, but certainly, this team, you could say, was disappointing in a few ways. And there were a few positions that certainly, defensively, this team was very capable of being the champion of the Big Ten last season. But, offensively, that's where this team had issues last year in a few positions. And, moving into 2022, though, this team on both sides of the ball definitely show potential. But from last season, this team lost to Penn State in week 1, 10-16. Obviously a tough loss, a defensive loss. It was a low-scoring game to start out the season there. Did beat Purdue 30-13. That was kind of the game there in late October where this team really started to look like a big contender in the Big Ten West. The first half of the season, this team kind of looked like, it looked clear that this team was not going to win the Big Ten West and it was going to be Iowa. But the second half of the season, this team started getting some wins going. And, this team quickly turned from being a team that was almost looked like an outsider in the Big Ten West to being towards the top. And, if they would have beaten Minnesota in that last game, Wisconsin would have been in the Big Ten title game. So, obviously that was a tough loss there and kind of it just ruined their hopes of being in the Big Ten title game. But otherwise, they beat Iowa 27-7. They beat Rutgers 52-3. This team had some good wins last season. That Minnesota loss was obviously tough, and they did beat Arizona State, though, in their bowl game 20-13. So first 6 games, you can see, this team was 3-3 in their first 6, which obviously wasn't a good sign, but they finished out the season 6-1. Their only loss down the stretch was to Minnesota. Here's your roster preview going into next season. This team returns their starting quarterback, Graham Mertz. Graham Mertz last season, very polarizing. He had some, he was promising at times, but for the most part, he just wasn't a good season for him. 1,900 yards, 10 touchdowns, 11 picks, had more interceptions than touchdowns, and his completion rate was nothing special at 59.5%. So the quarterback situation certainly is interesting going into next season, but Graham Mertz, he was the starting quarterback last season, but certainly, I don't know, going into 2022, he needs to improve a lot if this team wants to be, considering this team was 9-4 last season with Graham Mertz at quarterback, that is pretty impressive in itself. But the running back position looks excellent. You got Braylon Allen, the rising running back, the freshman running back coming back for next season, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns last year. He's coming around. He played very well, especially towards the end of last season. You could tell how much he improved. You also got your second running back returning for next season, so the backfield looks really good for Wisconsin going into next season. This team is known for producing some pretty insane, outstanding running backs, and it looks like Braylon Allen in particular is the next one in that group. Receiving core, Danny Davis III is gone. Your second in receiving, Jake Ferguson, your tight end's gone. Kendrick Pryor, your second wideout's gone. The receiving core does take a couple of hits for sure, but then again, this team really relied on the rushing last season to have success. If you look at Danny Davis, he only put up like 470 yards last season and 2 touchdowns. This team was a rushing offense last year. The receiving core, Danny Davis is talented. Jake Ferguson was certainly talented, but when it come down to it, this team was mainly a rushing offense. You also lose 2 on the offensive line, 1 defensive line, 3 linebackers, and 4 in the secondary. So defensively, you do lose a few key starters as well. So this team, I would say, they do have a moderate amount of losses for sure, and that does concern me a bit going into next season. But let me just say, the Big Ten West is wide open going into next season, and it was kind of that way going into 2021 as well. But in particular, 2022, I could see 5 or 6 teams winning that division this season. You got Wisconsin, you got Minnesota, Iowa. You never know about Purdue. Potentially they could be good next season again. Nebraska, who knows? There are multiple teams. There are a lot of teams that could win that. Honestly, once again, I think 5 or 6 of those teams are capable of winning the division. So it's going to be competitive. We'll see what happens. But, this team, the chance of winning the Big Ten West is Wisconsin and Minnesota are probably my favorites right now. Purdue, you can't even sleep on them either, though. That's why it's so tough, but we'll see what happens. But Wisconsin, this team definitely they got a good chance, but offensively, this team does have to improve for sure going into next season. Looking at the transfer portal and recruiting next, the defensive back situation, you got Justin Clark, Jay Shaw, and Cedric Dort coming in. So the defensive back, the secondary, you do lose 4 of your starters, or 4 in that core going into next season. So bringing in 3 through the transfer portal is going to help. Contez Lewis, a receiver, is coming in from UCLA. Abbott, a receiver in this receiving core. He really didn't have too big of an impact on this team last season, but he is not going to be around for next season as he is in the transfer portal. Recruiting-wise, this team is 45th in the nation, 11th in the Big Ten, so nothing too outstanding. You got 2 4-stars coming in and 13 3-stars. But that said, let's look at your schedule now going into next season. You start off the season against Illinois State in a home game. Then you got Washington State out of the Pac-12 coming in. Then you got New Mexico State on the 17th, and your first conference game is against Ohio State in Columbus. That's certainly going to be a challenge. Ohio State's probably my early favorite to win the Big Ten. Nothing new there. Ohio State is always a big contender in the conference, and considering how much they got returning going into next season, Ohio State looks excellent going into next season. Illinois at home, then you got Northwestern on the road, Michigan State on the road, Purdue at home, Maryland at home, then Iowa and Nebraska both on the road, then Minnesota at home to finish out the season. So I would say this is a pretty tough schedule here. Michigan State's going to be good. Ohio State's going to be good. Maryland's your 3 crossover games into the East Division are all good teams. Ohio State, Michigan State, Maryland all are definitely good teams, especially Ohio State and Michigan State. So it's a tough schedule, but let's look at the first half here. Illinois State, easy win. Washington State at home. I'm going to put that as a yellow game, but I'm going to favor the Badgers in that game for sure. Washington State could maybe give them a fight, keep it close, but Wisconsin, I do feel they'll still win. Mexico State, easy win. Ohio State on the road. I'm going to favor the Buckeyes in that game. Ohio State is, you could maybe consider that it was slightly a down year in 2021, even though they were still outstanding last year, but they didn't win the Big Ten East, so you could consider it to be a bit of a down year for Ohio State. But, this team, Buckeyes look great going into next season, so I'm going to pick them to be favored right now. Illinois Northwestern, both yellow games. I'm going to favor Wisconsin in both of those, but certainly maybe even that Northwestern game, it could certainly be close. Looking at the second half of your schedule, Michigan State on the road. I'm going to favor the Spartans in that game. Michigan State, I don't know if they'll be as good or better in 2022, but they don't have Kenneth Walker. So, Kenneth Walker is the reason why Michigan State was as good as they were last season. I really do feel. Not having him going, they've got plenty of talent as well, but not having him next season, that's going to be a challenge for Michigan State. But nonetheless, still going to favor the Spartans there with them being at home. Purdue at home. I'm going to favor Wisconsin against Purdue, although it's going to be close. I'll favor them against Maryland as well. Same thing with Iowa, Nebraska, and Minnesota. So I'm favoring Wisconsin in a lot of games, but there's a lot of yellow games on this schedule for me. So I do expect a lot of these games to be close, but I do think Wisconsin is on the winning end of a lot of these matchups because of their depth on their defense, as well as, if their offense improves, which I do expect it to. They're not going to have the best offense in the Big Ten, but I do think with the running back situation, there's potential on this offense. And so I'm going to favor Wisconsin against Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, etc. I do think this team definitely gets at least 8 wins next season, and your ceiling is up to 11-1. So I do expect this team to definitely be a contender, and I wouldn't be surprised one bit if they won the Big Ten West next season. But once again, that Big Ten West is very competitive. Illinois Northwestern, I don't think those teams are really much in the running right now, personally, but I do think Purdue, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, all of those teams are very much worthy of winning the division, and same thing with Wisconsin, obviously. So we'll see what happens, but let me know your thoughts and comments below on this Wisconsin team, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Once again, my projection, 8-4 to 11-1 for the Badgers. Appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.